Hear that? That's the sound of you creating your own destiny. While others are waiting in line for brunch, you're spending Saturday in the garage. Because you went to advanceautoparts.com, ordered a platinum battery with a 3-year replacement warranty, and picked it up in-store just 30 minutes later. Now, installing a battery isn't an all-day job, but what the brunch crowd doesn't know won't hurt it. Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back on the road. Visit advanceautoparts.com to learn more.
The Steve Austin Show is brought to you in part by Great Clips. At Great Clips, they want you to love your haircut. That's why they created Clip Notes. Notes that tell them what you like, so you get your same great haircut every time, anywhere. With Clip Notes, no matter which stylist cuts your hair, you'll get the haircut you want. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
The following program is a podcast1.com production. From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Now, here's Steve Austin.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Steve Austin Show. I am coming to you from Sparks, Nevada today. That's right, I am on the road. Hershey, Moolah, myself, and Kristen jumped in the silver RV and hauled ass the other day after my meeting with El Segundo Brewing Company and made it all the way over here to Sparks, Nevada. I'll tell you what, this ain't the Unleashed show, so I keep this as family-friendly as I can. When I get in that damn RV and load everything up, I like to leave early in the morning, by 5 or 6. So by noon, 2 o'clock, you got the bulk of your trip behind you. But we didn't leave Los Angeles till about 12:30. We knew we were driving 483 miles. That's going to take about 8-9 hours because of the speeds going up all those mountains, going into elevation, coming into Nevada. I tell you what, man, those damn 18-wheelers come whizzing around those corners. You think they're in your lane. That rear end and that RV ought to be geared just a frog's hair lower, so I got more climbing speed going up. And I tell you what, the twists and the turns and all those damn valleys going up those mountains. And then finally, when you get into Carson City, whatever it is, Carson City coming into Reno, god dang, the wind coming off the Sierra Nevadas just blows like a son of a gun. Damn near blew me off the road. And that's about a 10 or 15 mile stretch through there. And I tell you what, it's towards the end of the drive, about an hour on the back end of that, I already got white line fever. I'm white-knuckling the steering wheel, trying to hold the damn thing on the road. I told my wife, I said, we ain't never going to leave at about 12:30, 1 o'clock from Los Angeles again, unless we're only going 100 or 200 miles. Because when you're trying to make a 500-mile run, leaving at noon just ain't happening. I don't like to drive at dark, especially down them damn mountain roads. And we drive this road all the time when we come up here to Sparks to see our family. But anyway, tomorrow morning, as you listen to this podcast, I will be on the road back to Los Angeles, where I will get on my email and answer all the questions that you guys sent in to questions at SteveAustinShow.com. I sent out a tweet on my Twitter account, Steve Austin BSR. So I'm going to sit down and we're going to BS and we're going to do it Unleashed style coming up this Thursday. I'm just looking forward to getting that RV on the road early in the AM and then getting back to Los Angeles probably about 2-3 p.m. and getting back to work. It has been a good vacation. I needed it. I miss going down to Texas. Didn't get a chance to go down there and see Ted Fowler 361 and blast a couple of doves, but we made the best of it. Came down here and saw family, had a bunch of people over here, had a great time, and it's time to get swinging back at work. I got some real cool guests coming up. And then really gearing up for deer season, because deer season is right around the corner. Take care of some obligations I've got in October, November, and then haul ass to the Broken Skull Ranch, and that's when the work's really going to start. Hunting and mowing on a Komodo tractor, the whole damn pasture. The Broken Skull Ranch has been getting so much damn rain, it looks like we've never mowed it from since the day I bought it almost 10 years ago. So a lot of work to be done over there. But anyway, I'll tell you what, let me tell you something about today's podcast. I was scratching around for something to do, someone to talk to, and I said, well, you know what, maybe I'll do a Q&A. And then I started reading my questions on questions at SteveAustinShow.com, and I got an email from a guy named Tim Kail. And Tim Kail, he writes, like on his Facebook, the Work of Wrestling Facebook page, all these write-ups about wrestling, and the guy goes into a lot of details. And he's got a wrestling podcast called The Work of Wrestling podcast, which is on iTunes. And on Twitter, he is Tim Kail Writes, Tim, Kail Writes. And he sent me a real interesting email about breaking down WrestleMania 13, some of the other things that I've done. And I was going to break down my 2 out of 3 falls match with Triple H way back in the day from 2001 at the Thomas & Mack Center in Las Vegas. I watched that match about 3 or 4 times. I was having a hard time breaking it down because I wasn't moving real good that match. For some reason, I think that match came after a long layoff. Maybe I had a little bit of ring rust. My timing was just a little bit off. Didn't blow up. But it was just hard to try to break that match down. And I tried about 3 or 4 times, and that's a 40-minute match. Wasted a big part of my day, and I said, you know what? Tim's talking about breaking down these matches. Maybe he wants to break down some pro wrestling. We'll talk about the business. Seemed to be a guy that's real passionate about the business. So I said, hell, I direct messaged him on Twitter, got a hold of his ass. I said, hey, man, you want to do my podcast? And he says, when? I says, now. He says, yeah, man, I'd be happy to. So, man, my conversation is basically from a longtime pro wrestling fan. Young cat, but he had a few good points on the business, many good points, actually. He's very passionate about the WWE, and he's a Raw guy. He loves Monday Night Raw, big wrestling fan. So we just shoot the breeze, and we talk about some of the things going on in the business of wrestling, and he offers a little bit of his insight. And that's the guy you're going to hear from today on the podcast right after I get done talking to you guys about the Dollar Shave Club. They've been a long-time sponsor of this podcast, and I've been getting their razors since they started. They're great quality blades for a fraction of the price of the big razor corporations. And DollarShaveClub.com/Steve delivers those razors right to your front door. No more shopping mall or drugstore trips required. But did you know that Dollar Shave Club has more than just razors? They got a whole line of great products that will make you look and smell like $1,000,000, like the Dr. Carver's Shave Butter. Use that with your Dollar Shave Club razor, and your face will feel as soft and smooth as a baby's bottom. Dollar Shave Club has stuff for your hair and your face and your underparts. And once you're in the club, you'll see that they've got the best grooming products on the market, and they're all affordable. Your wallet will love you. And right now is your chance to see for yourself why so many of us love Dollar Shave Club. If you're not a member yet and have never joined, now is the time. You'll get your first month of razors free. Just pay shipping. After that, it's only a few bucks. So join today. Go to DollarShaveClub.com/Steve. That's DollarShaveClub.com/Steve.
Hello there, you beautiful American, Canadian, British person, Australian. You know what? You might be from Russia or Montreal avec les habitants. C'est moi. It's me, Jay Moore. You know me from the More Stories podcast. I'm a comedian, I'm an actor, and I talk to people that fascinate me, like Brandon Boyd from Incubus, super funny Jim Jeffries, Jay Leno, Charlie Sheen, Lakers owner Jeannie Buss, and a whole lot more. Download a few episodes of More Stories now. More Stories podcast every Monday. Podcast One app, iTunes, podcast1.com.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
All right, everybody, I'm rolling sound over here. I'm not at 316 Gimmick Street. I'm in Sparks, Nevada. Visiting some in-laws over here. My brother-in-law, the mountain man, professional guide, taxidermy, mechanic extraordinaire. And I was sitting there thinking, you know what? I got to get in my Tuesday podcast. And what am I going to talk about on my Tuesday podcast? So I go to questions@steveaustinshow.com, the email that I give you guys to send your questions to. I just sent out a tweet saying, hey, send me some questions. I'm probably going to answer those on Thursday so I can let it all fly and use 4-letter words. In the meantime, I got an interesting email from a gentleman. We've been in communication in the past. He's written some very in-depth articles about WWE. Seems to be a very passionate wrestling fan. His name is Tim Kail. And he wrote me an email and he says, Dear Steve, if you have time/interest, here's a link to my 100 podcast, and I analyze/celebrate your match with Brett at WrestleMania 13. My favorite match, and like many, I believe it's the best match of all time. It's really the standard for great pro wrestling storytelling, and something I hope today's younger generation of wrestlers watch watch on repeat and learn from. I provide commentary in real time when it's synced up with the match on the network, inspired by what you did on your show 2 years ago. So anyway, there was Tim, and he sends me this link to his podcast. And Tim joins me on the phone today because, you know what, I figured I've talked to Tim, corresponded through Tim a few times on email, a few direct messages on Twitter, and I figured, hey, man, this guy really seems to love the business of pro wrestling. That's the business that I know, and that's the business that I come from, and that's the business that's responsible for everything that I am, due to a career of hard work, sacrifice, and paying my dues. So I'm very grateful to everything that pro wrestling has done for me. So, Tim, welcome to the show. Let me ask you, you're in a 617 area code. Where are you from?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania. That's where I was born. But right now I'm in New York. But this is my brother's old phone, so that's why it seems weird that he's got a Massachusetts area code. So I'm actually in New York using his old phone.
Okay, now Tim, how old are you?
I am 30. I have recently turned 30.
Okay, so how long have you been watching the business of pro wrestling or sports entertainment as we know it today? How long have you been watching the business? Because you've written some very in-depth articles. Mick Foley has retweeted a lot of your stuff on Facebook and taken to heart a lot of your words. So how did you become such a big fan of the business?
It started you know what the origin of it is Rocky 3, actually. I was really little when Rocky 3 played, and you just saw Thunder Lips. and that was actually also the first time I realized it was a work. Like, I came into the business knowing it was a work, so that was never really an issue for me. So, like, very early on in the 80s, you had to be aware of pro wrestling. You know what I mean? Like, it was everything. It was everywhere. And then it kind of dipped off for a little bit. But then when you got on your run and The Rock got on his run and Mick Foley during the Attitude Era, that hit me at the sweet spot when I was, like, around 15 years old. And I got and it's just so cool to talk to you right now, Steve. And I'm genuinely honored to be on your show and tell you this. Like, you versus The Rock, when I was like 15 or right around that age, that was some seriously inspiring, life-altering stuff. Seeing you and him go up against each other, and just the bravado and the intensity that you both had. I took that with me to high school. I took that with me through life, and it helped me when I needed it. So right around the height of the Attitude Era, and then I got back into it most recently, the past 5 years, right around the time CM Punk got his pipe bomb promo. So it's been a lifelong thing and stops and starts.
Now that you've been a fan, you talked to me a little bit about the Attitude Era stuff, CM Punk with the pipe bomb promo, and watching and reading some of your in-depth articles. You've kind of taken, you're in 100% on this. You look at it at a much deeper level than I think many people do. That being said, have you educated yourself on some of the stuff from the mid-'80s, some of the stuff that I grew up on that I consider some of the best stuff of all time? Going back to, the Crockett days, NWA, Mid-South Power Pro, and World Class Championship Wrestling. Have you delved back into those years? Because at being only 30, you'd have to go back and do some researching, because I doubt you would remember that live.
Exactly, yeah. See, this is why I call your podcast an education, precisely for this. I have only dipped my toe into the WCCW waters. I heard you, I forget what you wrote down. You might have been talking to Ric Flair, but I wanted to see Ric Flair in WCCW versus one of the Von Erichs in a cage match for the title. I don't know, it's escaping me right now. But you kept talking about how the Von Erichs were just so over, Kerry, how there would be this high-pitched squeal when he came out in the Sportatorium. And I wanted to see that for myself. And here's a free plug for the network. They got that stuff on the network with World Class. So Like, I just switched that on. And it was during a time when I wasn't too happy with what was going on with Monday Night Raw. So I was like, all right, let me go back and see what Steve is talking about and see what everyone's talking about. So I just watched a few episodes, and I was immediately pulled in. I was so, and I still got to go. There's still a big gap in my pro wrestling history knowledge. I still got to watch more. But I was so struck by the authenticity of the presentation and how it was 100% presented sincerely as a sport. And then you see Kerry come out, and everyone's going crazy. And you see Rick come out in this robe, and I forget who was it that interfered in the match. But anyway, when someone interfered in the match, there were two refs, and when there was all this discombobulation in the end, it seemed like a riot was going to break out. It's like, that's how intense it was, and the investment of those fans. So to answer your question a little bit, and it's going to be a lifelong thing with me. So that's that. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, it does. But it brings me to a question now. You had a post on Facebook, and I can't remember exactly what that article was, but Mick Foley, I think he re-Facebooked it or whatever you call it. What was that original article that you wrote that caught Mick Foley's attention? Then I read it, and then we started communicating a little bit just, here or there with an email or a tweet. But what was that first article you wrote?
The very first one I wrote that got your attention was you called WrestleMania 17. And I remember listening to that. And as I said, that was such a big moment in my life, the WrestleMania 17. And I listened to your call, and it just it opened up this other door in my mind in terms of the way I saw pro wrestling. And so I decided to do a breakdown of your breakdown of WrestleMania 17. And then I was like, I thought, it's a long shot. Let's see what happens. I'll send it to Questions at Steve Austin show. And within a few minutes, you got back to me. And you were like, this is great. Do you mind if I post it on my website? And then we did that a couple times. But then when we got to the WrestleMania 13 article that I wrote of your call, then you posted that on your website. And I'm happy I get to tell you this. That was on your website for a year. And you gave me free traffic by reposting my article. And that's a huge boost for me. So thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for doing that.
So then what is your take on the state of wrestling as it is right now, going back to the Ric Flair Kerry match that you watch and the very authentic presentation of this as basically a shoot sport or, as a real sport and versus what's going on today because you were talking about just being enamored and roped in. You could totally suspend your disbelief and buy in. So what is today's product doing for you right here, right now? And as we talk, Monday Night Raw will happen here in a couple of hours. But how are you in tune growing up with the Attitude Era and looking back at some of the stuff that I told you and being in the here and now? What are your thoughts?
Oh, that's a big question. I want to say something that's useful, something that can actually be useful to the company, to the wrestlers. So speaking as a pretty much lifelong wrestling fan who's very aware of what the WWE wants to do in terms of creating a kind of entertainment extravaganza and appreciating when they do that well. But what I definitely want to see on Raw consistently, because I'm a Raw guy. That's my primary. I dabble in pretty much everything. I keep myself aware of all the other promotions, but I'm a Raw guy. And what I want to see from Raw, more than anything, is straightforward characterization. I want to see characters who are human beings. I want to see the wrestlers speaking from a place of honesty and reality. And I want to know what each one of them, what makes each one of them distinct and an individual. I think that's something that the Attitude Era had, that the 80s had, is that there was something distinct, informed by someone's real life. So I want to see that. And then I would love to see, I think, shorter matches. Weirdly enough, as much as I love wrestling, I'd love to see shorter matches with maybe less flipping. Like, I think when everyone in every match is diving out of the ring, I think you get numb to the action. So I'd like to see something more along the lines of what you and Brett would do, at least just to change up and give some variety to the card. So some wrestling, and then shorter matches, and then more vignettes to round out these characters, to form that emotional bond. You look on WWE.com, you look on WWE Network, there's all these shows and all these little interviews that give you insight into who these people are and what makes them unique. I want to see that on Raw itself.
All right, need to take care of a quick thank you before we continue on. Y'all know I couldn't do this podcast if not for the sponsors and if not for you guys supporting the sponsors. So thanks to DraftKings, the destination for 1 week fantasy MMA. I know you guys love MMA as much as I do. You're into the fighters. You know their strengths, their weaknesses, and their stats. So put your knowledge to the test and play MMA during this weekend's epic fight card at DraftKings.com. And if you use my promo code STEVE, you can play for free with your first deposit. So draft your MMA lineup and play to win over $100,000 in prizes this weekend. Just pick 5 fighters, stay under the salary cap, and rack up points based on how your team of fighters performs. Outscore the competition and win some serious cash. At DraftKings.com, every significant strike, takedown, submission, and knockout brings you closer to the payday. So hurry to DraftKings.com now to choose your fighters, and you could seriously cash in this Saturday night. Use the promo code STEVE and play for free with your first deposit. That's my promo code, STEVE, to play for free for your shot at over $100,000 in prizes. Only at DraftKings.com. Eligibility restrictions may apply. See website for details. Well, didn't you also write an article about why the fans must change? Because right now I'm on your website, workofwrestling.com, and you're talking about improvements in a new era. But you also wrote an article about why we must change. People, you and fans, must change as fans. Describe what you're talking about, because I didn't get a chance to read that article. How must you change as fans?
I would say the thing with the fans is, I think there's a complacency with fans. Like, and I am a fan, and I don't want to be what I'm criticizing here by giving, because it's like I do appreciate what the WWE is going for, and I see the improvements since the new year has begun, and I really enjoy it. I think what's happening with the fan base now is that the fans, I think, were conditioned for so long to believe in this struggle between the fandom and the WWE. Like, they've become so convinced that the WWE is some kind of enemy that they go into these shows, and this is a problem that's bigger than just wrestling. There's a complacency and a neediness in all of fandoms today, in all of entertainment, where the fans, the fan base, go to that form of entertainment with very specific demands that go beyond just having a good time. And so they go to this show, and if my guy's not in the main event, it's a bad show. And that is just not true at all. It can still be a good show even if your guy or gal is not in the main event. And I think a lot of fans, a lot of the, quote, smart marks, are going to these shows with this specific thing in mind, and if it doesn't hit that specific thing, then the whole thing's awful. And I think that's how fans need to change, is become fans again. Don't believe so much in your own smartness. Be respectful when wrestlers are cutting promos, like when Charlotte is cutting a promo about women's wrestling. Be respectful. Watch them work. React honestly. Don't put yourself over by making your chant the star of the show. Know that you are the auditory accompaniment to what is much more important than you, and that is the men and women in the ring risking their lives for your entertainment. So I think that mentality, less, you're supposed to entertain me, it's all about me. Less of that, more, oh man, I want to watch these people work. It's amazing. So that's what I'd like to see change mentally in terms of the fans.
Do you think fans look too much into, because the business is about as exposed as it's ever going to be? Everybody's known it's at work for years. But do you think people become disenchanted with the writing more so than what they're seeing, and are frustrated at a level of what they're doing behind the scenes rather than what they're doing on the screen in the ring?
I think, short answer, yes. I think that the fact that it's so exposed means you're going into it, and I think it's because pro wrestling was always so protected, that the fact that now it's exposed is kind of like a new chew toy that fans are just grabbing onto, the fact that it's exposed, and they won't let it go. And so, the writers get the heat. I think a big part of that is just that the WWE in its presentation has allowed itself to be so transparent. The WWE in its own fiction is like this entertainment organization that has writers. Whereas, like, when you were wrestling, versus The Rock, the basic fiction of Raw, like the basic principle and foundation of Raw, was that this was a federation of wrestlers, athletes, competing for the right to be champion. That was the foundation. And they were all like these kind of crazy people who Vince McMahon corralled to Raw every week to make money off of them and manipulate them. Like, that was the foundation. Where today, it's like they're entertainers going out there to entertain. And I think that basic foundation of what we have today allows people to critique it that way. If it's presented like this is a sport, you're not going to think about writers. You're just going to think about the action. I think they've allowed the fans to become too aware of the writers. And, of course, the thing is, I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes. But it seemed like it worked better when there were fewer writers. That's just simple. Maybe too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing.
Yeah, I've heard people say in the current system that, and this is not an indictment on the system, I'm not bashing the system, but I hear a lot of people say in the business these days that wins and losses don't matter. But what are your thoughts on that statement?
I think wins and losses definitely matter in the same way as they used to, in that in the moment, a win will make you feel good and a loss will make you feel bad. I think that basic idea is always there. But what happens is let's take Sami Zayn, for example. Sami gets a big win at Battleground, and then it doesn't really transfer into him having like a new feud with someone else and getting on a little bit of a roll, and then maybe going for the U.S. Championship or the IC Championship. It's like, I think that's the situation where it wins and losses don't matter. Like, what happens is like, someone will win, you'll get excited, but then that excitement will be negated after you see, oh, this isn't really going anywhere. And so it's like your emotional investment in someone's ascent or someone's victory gets tampered with over time if there doesn't appear to be a natural progression. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Well, but that's you. Well, and there's two ways to look at it. That's you looking into the storyline. Hey, man, it's great. This guy, A, B, or C, got a win. I'm happy about that. But then, well, if it's not going anywhere, what really did the win mean other than it gets to chalk one up in the W column? So, there's ways in how you win and ways how you lose. So if you're on this win streak, obviously, look at let's look at the NFL, 16-game regular season. So obviously wins matter, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you know, and if you get a loss, say a loss is a loss, but if the referees botch something and you really get screwed in that loss, well, you know, it still goes down in a loss. But if you win in WWE and you're racking up these wins, but then all of a sudden you get screwed by a heel who screwed you behind the referee's back or in front of the referee's back, or how, you know, the one guy gets an L, but because of the way in which he was dealt that L by getting screwed, that should elicit heat from the crowd because they're mad at the heel for cheating. So, you know, my point is wins and losses matter, but also is how you win or even how you lose, which can matter to spur on a feud even through a loss. So I guess what I'm saying is wins and losses matter absolutely to me. You can't have a guy that just goes out. Your number one guy, and let's take a John Cena for example. Your number one guy, John Cena. I mean, he ran wild for going on over 10 years, and he's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time. He won so many times because when he lost, it was an important, you know, moment for him to either take a loss, you know, hand the belt to somebody else, get somebody else over. But, you know, you always took care of John Cena, you know, back in the day. When I first came into WWE, they beat me like a drum every single night. And then I turned into Stone Cold, and it was all about the wins. And, you know, if I got screwed on a loss from the corporation or Vince, you know, it meant something. It was designed to elicit heat. But, you know, so many times these days, you know, when it's just 50-50 booking and you don't have this pecking order of, man, hey, man, this guy's got a boatload of wins, and, you know, this guy wins and loses every other match. I wholeheartedly believe that wins and losses matter, but if you're going to go somewhere with something and if someone gets screwed in a loss, well, and to generate heat, then that's one thing, but, you know, I do believe, guys, there is a pecking order, and that's the way I believe that, you know, if you got a guy that's batting .950 like Cena, okay, he's going to be on top of the card. You got your other guys that are rounding out the card. As you trickle down to the opening match, mid-card guys, they're not having as good of a win-loss success as that top guy is.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what you said was perfect. You specifically said it's wins and losses matter, but almost what matters more is how you win and how you lose. Because if you take, for example, you know, what brought us to this podcast, your match with Brett at WrestleMania 13, you lose, but in the bigger picture, you win. Like, you come out of that, you know, transformed, a hero. Well, the way you lost and the way you come out, you're stronger. Like, you almost go over despite not going over in the actual win-loss fiction of the thing. Like, there was a protection there, or I don't want to say protection. There was a direction that was there in that loss, where the work was moving you to this inevitably monster run.
Correct. And you know, Brett ended up winning fair and square. I just ended up, you know, passing out in a pool of blood. Obviously, the work on the back end of that with a Bret Hart interaction with Ken Shamrock further skewed him towards being a heel. We had work to do on each end, but yeah, I lost in such a fashion that you had to respect that. And I pretty much got, you know, basically a standing O, you know, on my way out. And this was a guy that when I went in, Chicago was a stronghold for me, but certainly I was more of a heel than I was baby, just because I was so vile, vicious, and just, you know, very, very direct. And, you know, I was a bad stick of wood. But that, if you were to ever...
You were relentless. Like, for anyone, you know, all the episodes leading into WrestleMania 13 are available, and it's really important. Like, my whole life I've seen WrestleMania 13 out of context, but over the past month I went back and I watched like all the Raws leading in. And what you say is completely true, and it gives me a newfound appreciation for that match and the difficulty of the double turn that you executed. Like, you were straight heel. Like, you were just torturing Brett for like months. And you can't really appreciate that unless you go back and watch it.
Yeah, and to have the moment where I pass out in a pool of blood, and I basically gained people's respect for not passing out, and it was a very entertaining match. And, I was talking a lot of trash that was entertaining, so people started gravitating towards that. And and many of the house shows I was being taken in as a baby, but nonetheless, it was a very important match. But let's get off of me and let's go back to wins and losses just one more second.
All right.
Okay, so let's take a heel, maybe like a guy like a Seth Rollins. He might be swinging baby right now. I don't really keep in touch with every single Monday Night Raw. I try to fast forward through them. I DVR them, so I stay in touch with the product as much as I can. He might be in a baby swing, but let's just say, for argument's sake, for conversation's sake, that he's a heel and he's just racking up win after win after win. Okay, he's racking up wins. But in most of these wins, let's say he's cheating. So on one hand, he's racking up wins. But the fact that he's racking up wins and he's cheating, well, that pisses you off because it still goes in the win column. He doesn't put anything in the L column, but by the way he wins, it pisses you off. Now, if he was going to be a heel and just beat everyone clean in the middle, and he's a good sized guy, 6'1", 6'2", 220, but he's not the most physical guy on the roster. So if you just beat everybody clean in the middle of the ring because you're that much better than them, well, that's kind of babyface-ish in nature, and you just got to come to respect him if he's not the biggest piece of trash out in the ring that and invoke a heel emotion. So when you got a guy that's going to cheat to win, and he wins his fair share, just straight up or by hook or by crook or whatever. But therein, if a heel's always cheating to win, he gets the W, and the guy on the receiving end that gets the L, he gets the L. But he should get something out of it. Well, he got screwed. It wasn't his fault. He didn't really lose that match. So the heat goes to Seth, which it should. The sympathy or the anger of the way the babyface got screwed goes towards the babyface. So therein, and we're not doing 50-50 here, but Seth gets something from cheating on the win. He gets the heat. The babyface gets the sympathy of the crowd, and like, God dang, I want to see that guy get another shot. But you can't get there by going 50-50 every time you go out. So I just believe in wins and losses matter, how you win, how you lose. And like I said, when I first came into the company, when they were beating me like a drum, hey, man, you can win all the time and really not learn anything about how to win, but you don't really know what you're getting out of it when you're in the 1, 2, 3 year level. But you start getting beat every night, that really teaches you something, how you lose, how you carry yourself out of that arena. You mope around, you have your head down, what do you do? So, winning is fine and dandy, but there's an art to losing. And so that anybody that's on the losing end of a booking decision, learn from that loss and play it accordingly, because learning how to lose can help get you over.
Is there, when you watch today, do you see that in wrestlers today, or do you see them, how do you feel about the way losses are handled today?
Man, sometimes I think there's just, it's the presentation for me. And so when you start off every Raw with the 15-minute promo segment, try to set the hook. Here's the storyline that's going to be told tonight, and we're following this formula. I would just like to see, well, let me just say this. I really love the way NXT is presented. Because NXT, and I'm watching the pay-per-views. I don't get a chance to watch, every single NXT episode that comes on. So when Corey Graves and the other guy are talking straight up about everything that's going on in that ring, just like, for instance, the Bobby Roode thing about, hey, Bobby Roode flew into Manhattan because he can't stand here and he wants to be as short time as possible. Hey, that's sticking within that's sticking within the globe, and we've got this atmosphere hanging over the globe. But man, they're just staying completely within the globe of everything that is NXT wrestling, and so I love that. And so sometimes in Raw and the big picture, their globe, they're all over the place, and so I like the fact that NXT is presented in a shoot platform or just in a, hey man, this is as real as it gets. This is NXT. And we were talking earlier about the business being so exposed, people just think about the writing of it. But, wrestling, it's just kind of a double standard. It's just the same as a friggin' movie. If you watch a badass Top Gun movie with Tom Cruise, you believe everything that he's doing because you're in a movie and you want to believe. Now, if it's badly written, it's not going to be that great of a movie. But Tom Cruise is not killing all the bad guys, so you should be able to watch wrestling with the same disbelief that you watch Tom Cruise kill bad guys. But
That's
how it's presented,
true.
and but they present Tom Cruise and Mission Impossible or whatever it is, as a shoot. This is really happening. So that's what I like about the NXT. So I can't really answer the question about how that's perceived in WWE because they're a little bit more all over the place. I like the style because NXT reminds me of days gone by, of my fondest memories of when the business was treated like an athletic event.
I feel the same in terms of NXT's clear focus on the reality and sincerity of a wrestling match and the characters in that match. And, for example, and in terms of getting heat and in terms of the way you win, like that tag match between Gargano and Ciampa and the Revival, Dash and Dawson, they talked about this moment with you. The way they get someone into a corner, because people they can't cheat as much, but the way they get into the corner and just hammer the guy like crazy, it's like they do that kind of little stuff to get heat, and then in the end, they're building to that moment when they've got Gargano in that hold, and it's like all of those moments are strung together, combined with the commentary, calling it like it is, that you end up just believing in the result completely. And no one gives that wink and a nod to the camera. That's the thing. Like you said, how the reason we believe in Tom Cruise is because the movie presents Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible as Ethan Hunt. There's no point in the Mission Impossible movie where Tom Cruise looks into the camera and says, I'm Tom Cruise in an action movie. And I think that's the kind of thing you occasionally get on Raw. Just kind of randomly, you'll get a thing on Raw that's like, hey, everybody, this is Raw, this is entertaining, be entertained. And the moment I'm told that the thing I'm watching is trying to entertain me, suddenly I'm taken out of it. There's no suspension of disbelief. I'm not entertained anymore because I'm not being told a story.
And you got to be consistent with a story. To me, I just think you can reboot that system, and you live and die. I mean, it's the WWE universe, so they can create anything and everything that they want. So I would love to see them kind of go to a more NXT style presentation and not so much of, I think the corporation at this point maybe has kind of run its course. Now with the brand split and now with the different general managers and all of that stuff. And I love everybody that's performing, but forever, we've been feuding, with the corporation. And so back in the day, it was just straight up wrestling matches. But I don't know if that's just due to a lack of talent, that you have to have the corporation or the evil powers that be happen to, run the place. And so they're obviously an enemy for any babyface that comes along, or I don't know. I just think that whole storyline to me kind of has been done to death. How has that affected you as a diehard wrestling fan?
I mean, if I can just be straight up with you and straight up with WWE, having an authority heel figure is, for me, just played. It's played. And it definitely results in the occasional good moment still. But you and Vince did it. And you did it the best it's ever been done. That cannot and will not be replicated, and nor should the attempt be made. I think the closest they got to doing a really good anti-authority angle was with Daniel Bryan. And that's because Daniel Bryan's a completely different gimmick from yours. And Triple H and Stephanie were completely different characters from Vince. Shades of him, but there was enough of a difference there. Whereas over for just so long, something like 16 years, we've settled into that dynamic of a heel authority figure. And what that does is that cuts down on the diversity of characters you can have. Because let's take Randy Orton was the kind of authority heel champion who kind of did their bidding. Then the championship went to Daniel. Then I think it went to then it went to John. Then it went to Lesnar. But then you've got Seth Rollins, who kind of became the Randy Orton. Now we've got, Kevin Owens, who's kind of filling that role. And those guys can only fill those roles with their own personality so much when that dynamic has been so persistent for 15 years. So for me, it makes me kind of numb to the proceedings, and it makes me ache for just something just different, where that's not even a thing in the show, where it's just about the personal rivalries between the wrestlers.
Yeah, I agree with that. As a wrestling fan, what else would you like to see out of the current product?
I touched on it in my article. I basically more of what I currently like. And what I currently like, I really liked the Braun Strowman and Nia Jax squash matches. I actually really like Braun Strowman a lot. I think what they're doing with him is perfect. Nia as well. But the three biggest things, if I had to give three things, number one, I want to see all of the awesome interviews that are on WWE.com, that are on WWE24, all of those interviews, I want to see on Raw itself. Raw's 3 hours. I don't see how you can't have a sit-down interview where Michael Cole interviews a Seth Rollins. Michael Cole, the way JR interviewed Mick Foley in that classic interview, it's like Mick Foley, as we know him, does not become Mick Foley. Huge draw, huge fixture of the Attitude Era. He doesn't become that if we don't get that interview segment, that 3-part interview segment with JR in the Attitude Era. So, like Roman Reigns just did a spectacular interview with Michael Cole on WWE.com, where he talked about the importance of the championship. He was calm, cool, and collected. He was just a guy, an athlete, and he was awesome. And that should be on Raw. I want to see that on Raw. Second thing is I'm starting as a fan, seeing the wrestlers and the risks they're taking. Who am I to say this? But just as a fan, as a viewer, I'm starting to get worried for them. I'm genuinely getting anxious and worried seeing some of the spots they're doing. So maybe rein that in a little bit. And then third, and last, and I think most importantly, I would love to just see the foundation of the show be present, just the basic idea of Raw to be, this is a sport, and we are presenting it as a sport. And to see that inform, literally, the camera work, maybe show us behind the scenes a little bit, like give us the camera behind the curtain. They did that in the last pay-per-view where they showed Kevin Owens come out from behind the curtain. That was great. Little things like that, little aesthetic details like that, and maybe take away some of the LEDs. So I hope that answers your question.
All right, got to take another minute to say thanks to one of my longtime sponsors who also happens to be a close personal friend of mine, Diamond Dallas Page and DDP Yoga. DDP Yoga has changed countless lives, including some of your favorite pro wrestlers like Jake Roberts, Scott Hall, Mick Foley, AJ Styles, and, of course, Chris Jericho. They all swear by DDP Yoga. And now DDP has taken his life-changing program to a whole nother level with the DDP Yoga Now app on iOS and Android devices. So now you ain't got no more excuses about why you can't start DDP Yoga. The app means you can do it anytime, anywhere. And the cool thing about the app is that you can do more than just DDP Yoga workouts. It's got all kinds of tracking features like pain tracking, measurements, and progress photos. DDP Yoga Now users can do the original workouts, the new 2.0 workouts, and live workouts from the DDP Yoga Performance Center. And to make it even easier than he's already made it, for a limited time, you can get the DDP Yoga DVDs for 20% off plus 3 months of full access to the DDP Yoga Now app. Just go to ddpyoga.com/Austin. That's ddpyoga.com/Austin to take advantage of this great deal. Commit now. Change your life now. Go to ddpyoga.com/Austin to get started. If you're looking to buy a new or used car, then you need to check out TrueCar.com and the TrueCar app. I bet you didn't know you can use TrueCar to help you buy a used car, too. It ain't just for new car purchases. There are over 500,000 pre-owned vehicles available from TrueCar certified dealers nationwide. And there are over 11,000 TrueCar certified dealers. And TrueCar lets you get upfront pricing information on new and used vehicles and lets you see what other people paid for the car you want so that you feel confident you're getting a fair price. With TrueCar via their TrueCar pricing curve, you see what other people paid for the car and you lock in your guaranteed savings. Then you connect with the local certified dealer of your choosing, take them your TrueCar guaranteed savings certificate, and make your car buying experience quick and easy. Over 2 million cars have been sold to TrueCar users by the TrueCar certified dealer network. And TrueCar users save an average of over $3,000 off MSRP. So when you're ready to buy a new or used car, visit TrueCar.com or download the TrueCar app. Some features not available in all states. Let's go back and two things then. I would think from what I've read on your website, you are a fan of the right outside the ring interview.
Yeah.
I am,
yeah.
And Vince McMahon used to do many of them way back in the day. So I'm a fan of the in-ring or beside the ring interview when after a match, after a loss, after a sneaky screw job finish, whichever the person they're interviewing, whether it's the heel or the baby, in the moment they're in that frame of mind. And so if you have a good interviewer there to be able to get that, and maximize whoever got the W, maximize whoever got the L for whatever reason it was. If there's a story there, you're not going to have a ringside interview with everybody that works on the card, but within the structure of a storyline, yes. And so it's almost like the UFC. Interview a guy after he's been in a hell of a fight. Some guys are great at it, some guys not so much because they've been knocked around for a little bit. But each person within the WWE knows the direction that they're going, and just, hey man, let them free for all that. Don't give them any words. They know what they've got to do. Just let them take care of the business at hand. And you should learn that business at hand as you go years and years and years in the business. So I'm a fan of the promo. And let's go back to the second thing that you just named about being a little concerned for the WWE superstars. I think that the risk factor is, pretty high right now with, you've seen a lot of injuries as of late, but it is a rough business. To that end, I think you do need to slow it down, but you emphasize selling. If I do something to somebody or somebody does something to me or as anybody current in the ring, if no one sells what you're doing, it doesn't mean anything. So the fact, if you emphasize selling, you can back off on all the high-risk stuff because everything that they're doing hurts. And that would take a lot of the risk factor out because I think guys nowadays are spun up so much that they think, hey, man, we got to do 1 million things, 16 hurricanranas, and all those crazy bumps to elicit a response. You can't work any faster than the guys are working right now. And they got some really great talent up there, but they're working at such a speed that they've booked themselves or they've worked themselves into a corner because, hey, man, it's like when you're driving a car. You hit the gas, you take off the gas. You hit the gas, you put on the brakes. These guys want to put the gas pedal down and just go. And I don't know, it can lead to a lot of injuries. Let's go back to a match you brought up. One of my favorite matches I've seen this year, maybe of all time, Gargano and Ciampa. I finally said his name right, people. Ciampa versus the Revival. Dash Dawson, man. Those guys didn't do anything that I would consider construe as dangerous. Nice little leg block on Gargano, but nothing. They worked the basics. They sold like hell. The baby faces had plenty of fire. Dash and Dawson full of mean streaks and shortcuts, and they didn't need to defy death to get that entire crowd. I guess that was in Brooklyn, wherever it was, but that was an awesome match where it just goes to show that you don't have to be all about thrills, chills, and excitement. If you tell a logical story and people care about you, and if you'll also notice in that match, Tim, none of the people in that match pandered to the crowd. They didn't do something and go, and try to get a response just based on that. So the pandering has got to be toned down as well.
I want to preface all this by also saying that I think the main roster on Raw and on SmackDown is a really great roster of talent. Like it's one of if not the best collection of wrestlers since the time of the Attitude Era. Like I truly believe that. But things like the risk that do take me out of it. But that specific point you made about the pandering, like, to me, if I'm right, like, to the pandering that I see or feel is where basically they do a move, they look to the crowd. They do a move, they look to the crowd. And I just feel like that takes me out of it, because why aren't you focused on the person you're trying to beat? They're down. Do something to and the reason I say that is because when I see something like that tag match with the Revival and Gargano and Ciampa, they are so focused on their opponent that I'm focused on their opponent. When they finally go to the crowd, when they go that one time to the crowd and they stand up on those turnbuckles, then I'm exploding with them. But for the rest of it, I'm in the action because they're in the action. I'm not watching a performance. I'm not watching this, athletic display of performance. I'm seeing a fight when they're focused on their opponent, and I would love to see more of that in the actual matches. I see that in Roman Reigns. The fact that I just said that made a bunch of smarks go crazy.
I think Roman Reigns is continues to improve. What are your thoughts on him now, where he's at?
Well, I think I like Roman. I do. I'm not ignorant of the criticisms that he has received. I think that the criticisms Roman received all throughout 2014, throughout 2015, even today, are criticisms that should have been directed very simply at the construction of his story. I think you give Roman Reigns a great story that takes place over the course of several months and that plays to his strengths as a performer and really understands the appeal of that character. You know, that character is not The Rock. He's not a wisecracking guy. Like, that's not that character. From his look, from his affect, from everything. Roman Reigns is Achilles. You know, he's like Brad Pitt in, what's that movie called? Whatever the Brad Pitt movie was, Troy. He's like Brad Pitt in Troy. And Brad Pitt doesn't say much in that movie, but when he speaks, it's like one line, and it sticks you in the gut. That's Roman Reigns. You can see he's this tall, stoic, tough warrior who doesn't need to say so much because his actions do the talking. Like, that's that character for me. And you get his personality and his kind of, quiet, brooding awesomeness when he talks to Michael Cole about what the U.S. Championship means to him on a WWE.com interview. But in terms of the company's adjustment to the negative reception he's received, which I think is unfounded by a lot of these fans, I think they've done a great job. I like him as United States champion. I think that it is a great way to build him back up to the main event, which he'll inevitably get back to if he keeps up what he's doing now. And when I see him wrestle, I see someone who sells, I see someone who's getting more and more comfortable, and I see someone who they're finally allowing him to play to his own strengths and not have to worry about cutting some, way too long-winded promo. He's just going out there, being himself more and more, and he can make the U.S. title mean a lot more, I think.
And he doesn't need to be a cliche kind of guy. They want to have him say some of these catchphrases or whatever. I think your analysis of who and what he is very solid. And I think the kid has a great look. He's the right size. I think he's going to be a big star. He continues to improve, but it's got to be organic in nature. One critique I would make would be of Roman will sell his ass off, and I credit him that, but he's got to learn how to sell a little bit more live. He dies sometimes during the sell, or just lies motionless. Sometimes when someone hits you with something or just gives you a move, it's an active sell, whether you're selling with your feet, you're kind of kicking the ground or shaking a hand out. It's got to be a more live sell. So sometimes he kind of dies down, and that's just an energy which you've got to pick up, and someone needs to be in his ear. Someone should have been telling him this a long time ago, but a little bit more active sell, and sometimes because he's a big guy selling on the run, a la The Undertaker. But sometimes he dies down in his cell. He's got so much gear on, that long black hair, you can barely see his face. But, keep your face up, sell a little bit more actively, and that's going to keep the energy of that crowd. That's going to keep that crowd carrying. If you die, then the crowd starts to die. So he'll fire up. And then he'll finally make his comeback. The comeback is a little regimented. It needs to be swapped out a little bit more. There needs to be more of a spark of fire in that comeback. But I think the kid's doing fine, and he has taken a lot of unjust criticism. But I like the way you summed that up. But Tim, in closing, you're the editor-in-chief of The Work of Wrestling. On Twitter, you're at Tim Kail Writes, but also you're on Twitter as another one, right?
Yeah, but that's my old one. I don't want to say that one.
Okay.
At Tim Kail Writes is the good one.
Okay, Tim Kail Writes, and then the Work of Wrestling podcast on iTunes. So your podcast is downloadable for free on iTunes, correct?
That is correct. New and free episodes every single Monday on iTunes if you're an iOS user, and Stitcher if you're an Android user.
Well, Tim, I just picked this email out of the blue. This is the first time we got a chance to speak. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I look forward to visiting with you more in the future. And people ask me all the time, do you read all your emails at questions@steveaustonshow.com? I read every single one of them. I read Tim's email, I gave him a call, and that's how this podcast happened. I wanted to talk to someone who is a wrestling fan and get their take on what's going on in today's business. So that's what today's podcast was about, and it was good talking to you, Tim.
Thank you very much, Steve. I just want to say, for the past 2 years, your podcast and what you say on your show has been a great source of inspiration to me. And, I wouldn't be here doing my own show if it wasn't for your call, WrestleMania 13 and 17. And I just thank you so much. Can't thank you enough for what you gave in the ring and this opportunity to talk to you.
I'll give you one little other thing, Tim. I was sitting here thinking about today's podcast, visiting my in-laws over here in Reno, Nevada, and I said, I got your email, and I said, you know what? Tim said I should break down another match. He kind of dug those things. I got a lot of response from doing those breakdowns of those matches. And I've been getting so many requests to break down the 2 out of 3 falls that I had with Triple H back in, I guess it was 2001 in Las Vegas at the Thomas and Mack Center. Started off as a regular match, turned into a street fight, and then they lowered the cage. It turned into a cage match. Triple H goes over 2 falls to 3. and I was going to break that match down, and I watched it 3 times this morning. And I think my work was a little sloppy that day because I think I just came from a layoff. There was some kind of injury. There was something going on, but I wasn't 100% in that match. You'll never see. I didn't blow up. It was just my timing was a little bit off. And you could see that first bobble there when Triple H tries to grab that headlock on me. We go into it just a short elbow. But I watched that match 3 or 4 times this morning. I was going to break it down. I said, man, I just can't break it down because I'd be picking myself apart at every single turn of that match. And it was a good match. It was a really good match. And I've always loved working with Triple H. And while he was laying there on top of me after he got the 3 count, this beer can flies over the cage and hits me right square in the forehead and bounces off. So I was like, God dang, I just gave you 40 minutes of the best 40 minutes I could give you, and I get hit in the head with the beer can at the end of the match, and it wasn't even open. So, I tried to break that match down today, Tim. I tried. I gave it about 9 minutes worth. I said, no, you know what? Let me call this Tim guy up, and we'll talk. Hey, Tim, it was good talking wrestling with you. Good luck with the podcast and everything else. And the podcast, once again, if you guys want to listen to it, the Work of Wrestling podcast on iTunes. Tim Kail, I appreciate your time.
I appreciate you too, Steve. Have a good one.
All right, everybody, give me the go home cue. It's time to wrap up his podcast and ride off into the sunset. And when I say ride off in the sunset for me, that means starting to pack up my illustrious silver RV, get everything ready, squared away, and we are going to hit the road tomorrow at about 6 a.m. This morning we woke up and there was snow on the ground. Hopefully it won't snow again tomorrow. But if it does, we'll still be on the road at 6 a.m. because I ain't never, ever gonna leave on a trip for 500 miles in the middle of the day ever again. I don't like to drive late at night. I like to drive early in the morning. So I'm fixing to start packing. So that means no videos of the day, hardly any plugs. I just want to say thank you guys for listening to the podcast. I appreciate all the word of mouth advertising y'all are doing on behalf of the podcast. I don't have an advertising budget here, and I appreciate y'all supporting the sponsor to the Steve Austin podcast because they're the ones that let me do this for you free twice a week. So big thanks to ddpyoga.com/Austin. Get 20% off the DDP Yoga DVDs and 3 months of full access to the DDP Yoga Now app for a limited time. Big thanks to DraftKings. Use my promo code Steve to play for free this weekend. Big thanks to Dollar Shave Club. Join dollarshaveclub.com/Steve and get your first month of razors free. And, of course, a big thank you to Amazon, who've been supporting this podcast since day one. Just use my Amazon links whenever you're doing any online shopping, and Amazon will kick back a couple of bucks to the podcast. Doesn't cost you anything extra. There's no hidden fees or charges. You can buy whatever you're planning on buying to help out the podcast in the process. And you can find my Amazon links by going to podcast1.com, clicking on the Killer Deals button in the top right corner of the page, and then hitting the Steve Austin Show button. I got Amazon links for Amazon USA, Amazon UK, and Amazon Canada. So once again, just go to podcast1.com, click the Killer Deals button in the top right corner, and then click on the Steve Austin Show. Bookmark it so you can find it easier. Hey, the 60-second AP News headlines are coming up next. Until then, my name is Steve Austin, and I will catch your ass down the road.
Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
I want to say thank you to Drop Stop, one of the great sponsors of this show. Drop Stop is the original patented seat gap filler, as seen on TV Shark Tank. Get the original Drop Stop at buydropstop.com and use code STEVE for 2 free gifts and free shipping. Stay tuned for the latest AP News headlines from Podcast One right after this.
When shopping for car insurance, consider this. Geico has been saving people money on car insurance for over 75 years. So if you're serious about savings, it's simple. Go to geico.com. After 75 years, they know how to save you money.
Update. I'm Carlotta Bradley. Southeastern governors are dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew. Florida Governor Rick Scott.
The brunt of our problem is really right now in Northeast Florida. I'm going to be here until people get back. I want them back to work. I want the businesses open. I want people back to school. I want people in their homes, and I want them to have power.
South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley says power needs to be restored and roads fixed so evacuees can get back home.
We are dealing with flooding. We are dealing with trees down. We are going to deal with debris removal. And so we ask for your patience.
North Carolina Governor Pat McCrory says 3 people have died in the state, so residents need to understand just how bad conditions are.
From Raleigh all the way east, stay off the roads, stay in your house, watch the football games on TV, bunker up.
3 people have died in Georgia, 4 in Florida. AP Update, I'm Carlotta Bradley.